The world of video game collecting is a funny place. One day you'll buy a copy of Cindy's Fashion World for your PS1 for about $50, the next it'll be worth upwards of $1,500 because there are only 1,000 copies. Some collectors just have to fully complete their PS1 libraries, even if that means spending 2 months' rent on a fashion game for 3-year-olds. But even if you've not got Cindy's Fashion World under your belt, you might actually have a few titles in your library that are worth a pretty penny. So I'm Amy from WhatCulture, and here are the 10 rarest and most valuable PS3 games you might own. 10. SOCOM 4 US Navy SEAL Full Deployment Edition. SOCOM 4 US Navy SEALs, released in 2011, is the last entry in the SOCOM series and the second to last game released by the studio Zipper Interactive before its closure in 2012. Zipper Interactive's closure has no doubt been the main factor in SOCOM 4's price increase, with the Full Deployment Edition selling for up to $100 in mint condition. Whilst the standard edition of the game seems to sell for peanuts, a fully collected special edition of the game comes with an entire PlayStation moveset, including the PlayStation Move motion controller, navigation controller, eye camera, and most importantly, a sharpshooter gun peripheral. Even if SOCOM 4 wasn't a beloved franchise for many players, PlayStation Move accessories certainly don't come cheap anymore. The standard wireless motion controllers go for about £50 on Amazon at the moment, and the sharpshooter gun peripheral can go for anywhere up to £40, provided you can actually find anywhere that sells one. It might actually be cost effective to try and hunt down one of the full deployment editions instead of buying the individual kit pieces. Hey, considering you at least get a copy of SOCOM 4 with it, that seems pretty good. 9. DRAKENGARD 3 Collector's Edition. DRAKENGARD 3, the somewhat divisive final entry into the mainline DRAKENGARD franchise, released in 2013 exclusively for the PlayStation 3. Being one of the few PS3 titles to never have been ported to other systems may have something to do with its recent price hike, but there actually is a little more to it. Only 2,000 copies of the collector's edition of the title were ever made, available for purchase exclusively through the Square Enix store. The copies of the collector's edition likely sold out before some fans even knew of its existence, ending up directly in the hands of collectors. Well, these collectors don't seem too keen to part with their copies, with less than 20 of the collector's editions showing up online in the past year. This has naturally driven the price through the roof, with the average cost of acquiring a copy increasing from $120 in January of 2018 to $350 as of October 2021. The price hike seems to show no signs of slowing either, so if you wanted to snap this edition up without having to take out a second mortgage, you best set up some eBay alerts. 8. Dragon Age Inquisition. Inquisitor's Edition. Dragon Age Inquisition was released in late 2014 for PS3, PS4, Xbox 360, Xbox One, and PC. The Inquisitor's Edition of the game was also released on all platforms, exclusively through GameStop. Whilst bagging a copy of the special edition is pricey regardless of which system you want to purchase it for, finding a PS3 copy is nigh on impossible. This is likely the driving force between its rather consistent price increase, currently netting you back an average cost of $250. The lack of available PS3 copies might have something to do with its simultaneous release on both current and next-gen systems, with the bulk of copies being sold for PS4 and Xbox One. Finding one is actually so difficult that if you're ever fortunate enough to come across one, maybe invest in a lottery ticket because clearly Lady Luck is on your side. There's only actually been one listing of the Inquisitor edition on eBay in the last 5 years, and that was all the way back in 2017. So if you're keeping an eye out for one, maybe don't get your hopes up. 7. The Last Guy. The Last Guy, released in 2008 exclusively on PS3, is a title that many people probably aren't even aware of getting a physical release. Whilst popular, the majority of people that played the game encountered it on the PlayStation Store or through PS Now. In fact, if you were lucky enough to import the game from either Japan or Singapore when it was available, it would run you an average cost of about 3,000 yen, roughly $25, and that's before you factor in the import fees. Comparatively, if you would have bought the game on the PlayStation Store when it was first released, it would have cost you about $8. The initial price of the physical release may have dissuaded some people from investing in a copy of the game when it was released on disc. Those folks might be kicking themselves now though, as a physical copy of the game will now cost you around $250. If you were a big fan of the game, this might annoy you because there are 3 levels exclusive to the physical release of the game, but it's not up to me to say whether those 3 levels are worth shelling out $200 for. 6. Rain. The 2013 title Rain was a rather unique adventure game released exclusively for PS3 in 2013. Much like The Last Guy, Rain only had a physical release in Asia. In fact, it was only possible to purchase an English version of the game from China or Taiwan. This likely meant that players in the West weren't even aware of a physical release. That is, until the price had already skyrocketed. What makes it even worse is that Japan's studio was disbanded in 2020, causing further price spikes from 2021 onwards. Nowadays, you'll be lucky to find a copy of the game for anything less than $300, with prices set to continue rising indefinitely. It's not impossible to find a copy of the game, and if you don't mind owning a Japanese copy, it's relatively easy. The problem is it's hard to get a gauge on exactly how many of the rare Chinese English copies were released. So if listings of the game began to slowly trickle out, collectors may end up sitting on all of the copies. 5. Fallout 3 Survival Edition. Fallout 3, released on all platforms in 2018, is no stranger to a special release. There are actually 5 separate physical editions of the game available for purchase, but only one of these costs an arm and a leg to buy. The regular and Game of the Year editions go for relatively cheap, whereas the collector's edition and the limited edition of the game carry hefty price tags. The most expensive edition of the game by far, though, is the Survival Edition. The Survival Edition actually contains everything the Collector's Edition does, except you also get a sweet Pip-Boy statue that simultaneously functions as a clock. Whether or not that's worth $350 is up to you to decide, but there are certainly worse things you could spend your money on, like an NFT for example. The fact that you could only purchase the Survival Edition through Amazon if you lived in the United States definitely didn't help, causing it to sell out immediately after release due to international customers happily paying the exorbitant export fees required to import to their home country. Well, it's a far cry from the Fallout 76 canvas bag debacle, huh? 4. AQUANAUT'S Holiday Hidden Memories. AQUANAUT'S Holiday Hidden Memories, the 4th installment in the Japanese series AQUANAUT'S Holiday, was released in 2008 exclusively on PlayStation 3. The English translated version of the game was released 2 months later in November of the same year. What makes this game so expensive and difficult to find may have something to do with the fact that the only English language version of the game was seemingly only available for purchase in Korea, with less than 20,000 copies ever produced. Copies of the game sell for upwards of $400, although interest in the game has only started to occur during the last year. In fact, only 4 copies of the game were listed on eBay this year, and it was seemingly impossible to find beforehand. What may have caused this uptake in sales is the game's recent popularity online because of its rather terrible English translation, reminding many people that the game actually exists. It's fair to say that this game wasn't exactly a system seller in the West, which may have inspired collectors to purchase as many copies as possible before the rest of the collective internet caught on to its existence. 3. The Last of Us Post-Pandemic Edition. The post-pandemic edition of the universally acclaimed The Last of Us launched alongside the regular edition of the game and the Survival Edition in 2013. The Survival Edition comes with a limited edition art book, the first issue of the Last of Us American Dreams comic, and a steelbook case. The post-pandemic edition also comes with all of these physical bonuses, but with the addition of a pretty sweet 12-inch statue of Ellie and Joel. The other main difference is that the Survival Edition can be bought used for $70, whereas the post-pandemic edition will set you back a whopping $1,000. So yeah, it'll cost you $1,000 if you want to get your hands on that cool little statue. There were no official numbers of how many units of the post-pandemic edition were manufactured, but considering Sony actively warned people that it was in very limited supply, it's fair to say that there aren't too many of these floating about out there. 2. NBA Elite 11. Now, NBA Elite 11 is a very curious example of a collectible game because technically it was never actually released. Cancelled before its scheduled 2010 release date on Xbox 360 and PS3, NBA Elite 11 shouldn't be able to be found anywhere in the wild. The only copies of the game that exist seem to have been leaked either by people that were sent review copies of the game or retailers that dumped their stock following its cancellation. As a result, it's impossible to find out how many copies of this mythical game are actually out there, and the price of the game reflects back on this. Loose copies of the title were being sold for somewhere around $250 back in 2011, but now can only be purchased for a staggering $1,000 if price listings on eBay are to be believed. The funny thing is, even though images of an Xbox 360 copy of the game are floating around on the internet, none have ever been sold, technically making this a bonus PS3 exclusive title. Fair to say it's not one of Sony's best exclusives, but we think it's fair to give them a pass on this one. 1. Uncharted 2 Among Thieves Fortune Hunter Edition. Although some of the titles on this list might have exceeded your expectations in terms of their pricing, it's more than fair to say that the Fortune Hunter edition of Uncharted 2 Among Thieves definitely takes the cake. The difference between the Fortune Hunter edition of the game and the majority of other entries on this list is that it was actually never available for purchase. Only 200 copies of the special edition were ever manufactured, and they were given to players lucky enough to win any one of several competitions Sony organised for the release of the game. So how much is it worth now? Roughly $2,250. And that number only seems to be going up too, with the most recent copy of the Fortune Hunter edition selling for $3,000 on eBay. So if you were lucky enough to win one of these copies, what did you get? Well, for starters, it came in a massive PS5 sized case that was signed by every member of the Naughty Dog team. You also got a soundtrack, some special concept art, and oh yeah, a massive ancient Tibetan dagger. Honestly, jealous doesn't even begin to cover it. And on that note, we've reached the end of this list of the 10 rarest and most valuable PS3 games you might own. Do you own any of these? I actually really want to know. Let me know in the comments down below. And remember to check out WhatCulture.com for more lists and articles like this every single day. I've been Amy from WhatCulture, and I'll catch you next time.